Recording in progress. So we are going to start thinking about our strategy for 2023, and actually it is quite a good time to do it, because by the time you sort of get to 2023 or next month, you're into Christmas, wind down. You know, some people are busy with events, some people are busy putting on things, or it's their busiest time of the year with selling products, etc. So, you know, by the time you've sort of done all of that and exhausted in January, you're already into 2023, aren't you? So sometimes taking a little bit of time out now to start thinking about the way forward is a good plan. Now, why do we need to do this? And like you said, you've done some training recently, you did it in 2020, but it's kind of like it moves lightning fast, unfortunately, social media. So it is thinking about, okay, so what does the 2023 social media landscape look like? And it is shaping up to be a really crowded, noisy place with more competition than ever for attention, more people creating content than ever, and also more networks potentially than ever. So it really does make sense to take stock and think about, where are you now? What's likely to be happening in 2023? And are you still putting your efforts into the best places and the best resources? So a good case point was Karen saying, you know, I'm really busy, I'm doing all the things, I do have some admin support, but actually, do I need to be on 3 platforms? And if I don't need to be on 3 platforms, which are the best ones to focus on? And to really start looking at actually what is happening at the moment. And to succeed in the coming year, of course, you need to be really clear on what you want to achieve. Because it's very easy, isn't it? Even like Linda said, to fall into the habit of, crap, haven't posted anything to social media for a while, I need to post something to social media. And you're almost on this kind of role of, I'm posting and feeding this content machine, but I haven't necessarily thought about why I'm feeding this content machine. And do I need to keep feeding this content machine in the same way? So what is it that we really want to achieve in 2023 by being on social media? Where is our target audience now? So just because I've been on Facebook for however long, are my audience still interacting and hanging out on Facebook? Should I still be there, for example? And really starting to focus down on our plan and our strategy. So it makes sense to start with the obvious, but, you know, often overlooked question when you're busy. Why am I using social media for business? What is the point of it? It does take time. It does take resources. So I need to think about, or we need to think about, why are we actually on these platforms? And what is our purpose for using? So why are we bothering? Literally, why are we bothering? So you need to bring it tightly down to who you're trying to reach. And ideally, you should have some goals. And if not, you should be setting some goals so that you can see if the activity that you're making is helping you reach those goals. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on target audience, but you should, as part of your overall marketing strategy and your overall business plan, know who you're trying to reach with your marketing efforts. So who is your ideal audience? And if you haven't done an ideal client customer persona type exercise yet, it probably is best to start with that. And I will put one in the chat that HubSpot have a good one to follow. So it might be worthwhile, if you haven't done that or haven't perhaps done it for a while, to at least sort of review who you think your ideal target audience is. Because depending on what you do as well, that may well change, because people change and demographics change, interests change, age groups change. So it might be worth you just even starting to revisit that. At the very least, for social media purposes and planning your actions and and activity on social media, you really need to know your age group that you're trying to target, where they're likely to hang out online, how they like to spend their time online, and how they like to consume content. So it might be that, for example, the very obvious example is you've got the older person where they might, go to blogs, they might go to news sites, they might use Facebook or Twitter to consume their content, and they like reading things or photos as opposed to video, whereas the younger generation are more likely to hang out on TikTok and not visit news sites and use TikTok as their news source, and they like to consume short, snappy video content. So thinking about the sort of basics of your target audience at the very least, who are your age group, how do they like to consume content, and where are they likely to be? Because if you don't know that, you can't begin to understand if you're even in the right place and reaching the right people. So one of the very good questions that Karen's kind of already started to ask herself is, am I still active on the right platforms? Because as we've said, the platforms change and it's very hard to keep up with the changes, and the demographics change. So 15 years ago, it was cool to be on Facebook. Everybody was on Facebook. Everybody was interacting on Facebook. We were poking each other on Facebook and all those kind of things. Now we're not necessarily doing that quite so much. And, there's not although there are a large people on Facebook, are they active on Facebook? Are they engaging actively on Facebook? I can name a number of people that are close to me that have a profile on Facebook, but will literally just use it to scroll through everybody and have a nose at what everybody else is doing. They won't interact with posts, they won't post themselves. So they're kind of like a silent lurker, aren't they? So it's really thinking about, are you just on those platforms because it's what you've always done, and you know them, and it's one of the big four, if you like, or it was one of the big four. So now is a really good time to review your activity on your platforms that you're already on, and if you're still focused on the right platform. Because it used to be a young platform, Facebook, and now it's a much older platform. So it's a good question to ask, and because they do move so fast and change so frequently, it's also worth asking, are you spreading yourself too thin? So is it better to be really good at, say, one or two platforms than trying to be across 3 or 5 and doing all of them a bit haphazardly? And for some industries, it's not easy to just say, well, we're not going to focus on Twitter anymore, or we're not going to do Twitter anymore, because you've got bosses and people and different audiences that you might need to serve. And equally, particularly with your charity like Ruth, you might find that different platforms serve different audiences. I will get a profile up in a minute for the demographics that are current, not necessarily what's coming up in 2023. So you might use LinkedIn in a very different way, and the content that you produce and the people that you're trying to reach in a very different way to, say, Instagram, and therefore it does have a purpose. It serves you in different ways, but at least you're using them strategically. You're planning your content strategically and how you use them strategically. So then you can justify it. You can justify, well, I'm on this for this reason and we will do this in this way. And you can be on some platforms because it keeps that content, but perhaps your target, your main focus is on one platform, and you spend more of your time and effort on that platform. So the other thing as well, which is a bit tough to do, is to ask yourself honestly, when you're reviewing your insights and your content, if your engagement and things have declined because it's the platform and your target audience has left, but is it actually because you actually doesn't have kept up to date with feeding that algorithm machine and the changes with it? So have you actually learnt the skills that you need to still be engaging and keeping up with the changes on that platform? So that's another thing to think about. Think about how that platform has changed, and if you're still producing the right kind of content in the right kind of format to still be making an impact on that platform. So for example, let's take Instagram. if you're still just posting square photos on Instagram, not even doing carousels, and you've noticed your engagement rate has tanked, you've not changed with the changes that Instagram has made in your content to help you change your focus more favorably on the sort of content that Instagram's pushing. So you may need to look at it objectively as well. So we'll take a step back, because it's one of the questions certainly that Linda and Karen have been asking is, what platforms are there out there at the moment? And we'll look at the big ones and then perhaps some of the other ones or declining ones. And you need to ask yourself, when you're looking at those, is your audience there? If so, how are they using those platforms? Can you use that account to help you achieve your goals? Because it might be, well, great, everybody's on TikTok and I'm on TikTok, but actually, I cannot produce 3 videos a week. I just can't. I don't have the capacity. So then actually it might be better off me focusing on somewhere else. And also at this stage, it's really good if you're going to review your platforms, go and have a nose at what your competitors are doing. What platforms are they on? How are they posting? Are they performing well in certain platforms that perhaps you're not? What kind of content are they creating? Or actually they're tanking in some areas, or they're not posting on that platform. And maybe that's an indication that it's not the platform to be on. Are they doing better on another? So this is a really good time to go and have a sneak around and a nose at all of these things before you move on to, okay, well, actually, I'm going to focus on this, or I'm going to try this year. And that's not to say abandon everything that you're already doing, but you might want to switch your focus for at least 3 months and see what difference it makes. So let's have a look at these platforms. And these were, I think I wrote down somewhere actually, I think it was sort of mid 2022, sort of October, well, late 2022, these stats are. And the one that could be very different is Twitter, which we'll come on to. So, I mean, this is an overview of the different platforms. And so what I've listed is kind of the active users. So in other words, how many active users it's got. So, but also with that, it says, yes, my target market is more likely to be there. But equally, it's a very crowded market if everybody's there. So there's those things to consider as well. And then the largest age group, that's not to say your age group isn't on the other platforms, but this is the largest active age group. And some of these are more surprising than you think. But that equally doesn't mean that just because they're the age group that you're trying to reach on that platform, think about how they use the platform and do they want to hear from your business or your brand whilst they're on that platform, because the way they use platforms might be very different as well. So how will they be receptive? And then also we have to consider the content type. So can you do links? Can you do images? Can you do long form text? Can you do video? And equally, can you create those things? So it's, worth evaluating, whilst it might be, yes, video is hot and the way to go, if you physically can't actively do that, then you probably don't want to be on the platforms necessarily that focus so heavily on that. So you have to weigh up all these different things. So you've got, obviously, Facebook is still very big in its numbers globally, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's easy to reach people on Facebook, because it's so competitive that you kind of, unless you've already got a very engaged audience, it's really hard to gauge traction as a business on Facebook at the moment, unless you are paying for adverts and things. And then if you're paying for adverts and things, you kind of want the activity behind it to keep drawing in those individuals. So you've got to kind of weigh up that side of things. But Facebook is really good in the sense that you can use a mixture of different content types. So that does help you in that respect. So, and you can go in, you can drill down to your analytics and have a look at how well you're performing. So for me, Facebook isn't great. Yes, some of my audience are on there, but I don't find I get a lot of engagement. I don't enjoy Facebook. That's probably part of it. And I never advertise on Facebook either, which probably doesn't help. But and it's not a focus for me. I'm still there. kind of, because I have to be, because obviously doing social media marketing, I kind of have to know what's happening with all the different platforms. And of course, there's that crossover between Facebook and Instagram, but I don't focus on it. I don't really have a massive strategy for it because it's not my main area where I find I get results. Whereas for me, for example, Instagram is somewhere that I find I get results, and I do focus on it, and it is my main focus. So even though I'm across different platforms, that's the one I put the time and the energy and the most of my strategy into, and then I'll sort of do the others on a less focused fashion. So you can do those things, and obviously I'll use it very differently to how I use Facebook. And you know, one of the key mistakes that a lot of businesses make when they're time poor is they're across these different platforms, but then we'll what we'll do is we'll shove on a post on Facebook, and then we'll shove on the same post on Instagram, the same post on Twitter, and we'll tend to do it at the same time. And actually, if someone's habit is to go through all their social media platforms in a break or at lunchtime or in the evening, they're saying the same thing, and they're not going to engage on that same post across all those different platforms. So wherever they've been first, they might engage on it, but then you're going to harm your algorithm engagement stats, if you like, on the other platforms, because they're not going to engage with it no matter how much they love you and your brand on the other platforms. So that's not to say you can't repurpose it for those platforms, but perhaps post it slightly later or in a different way or with a different image or a different strategy, a different video. We'll talk about measuring engagement in a minute, and it's different for different platforms, and actually it's a lot lower than you think. So I think I've got some stats towards the end, so if you remind me, Linda, I'll try and share some of those stats towards the end, because I did sort of thought that might come up, so I've sort of got them as old slides from something else that I can bring. I don't spend any money on advertising it either, Karen. I'm very much pro organic, and it was interesting because I was in a room with a lot of paid ad people the other day, and yes, there is definitely a purpose for it. And if you've got something to promote, like you're selling a course or you're selling an event or things where you can directly, you know, budget towards it for the profits, never boost, you know, you're directly promoting something, and it will potentially help you get there quicker, and it can be quite targeted. But if you haven't got the organic activity behind it, you're not going to convert them, because if they're looking at your Facebook or they're looking at your website before they purchase, it's not going to happen. So you need a mixture, and you don't have to do paid advertising, but sometimes it will help you get there potentially quicker, but only ever do it for a paid service. So directly an event or something that you're trying to promote and advertise and get money out of directly, not for value, not for followers, not for any of those things. It's what I would advise. So these are last quarter stats, as I said, and platforms change fast. And one thing is always worth keeping an eye on such stats, perhaps every quarter reviewing, you know, what is happening in the social media world. Because of course, this is the most downloaded app still. It was last year. TikTok is still the most downloaded app. It was very much last year, and you kind of understand that with the pandemic and people being bored and wanting entertainment and those kind of things, but it's still growing. And so we have to consider that, and consider, you know, even if you're not yet ready for TikTok, not yet got strategy on TikTok, and don't yet feel your target audience are there yet, it is likely, as it is with all of these things, that at some stage they will come across. So we were all on Facebook. Now our age group are more on Instagram, for example. We've gone from Facebook to Instagram. More of our age group spend more time on Instagram. There will be a stage, probably, unless something else pops up, that more of our age group go to TikTok, and it is growing. And I'll show you some stats later that show that the older age group is growing. They might not be posting, but they're there. So it might be worth certainly grabbing your username, if nothing else, so that if you need to change strategy later, you've got the ability to do that. And of course, talking about Twitter, and it's one that Karen's already mentioned, and I've noticed actually before recent events, just with monitoring different accounts, that Twitter use is down. I don't know if you've noticed this yourself, just the amount of people actually posting and engaging on Twitter, I've noticed is less. And of course, unless you've been in a dark room somewhere, there is a Twitter takeover. So Elon Musk has recently bought Twitter, and some people are leaving in huge numbers. So that obviously isn't going to help. Now, whether it dies a death, whether he turns it around, or whether something like Mastodon, which is the new app that has been launched by a guy who was previously at Twitter, who obviously left Twitter when Elon came in and swept everyone out, that they've been working on. And they launched probably before they're ready. But a lot of people who don't like how Twitter's going have gone to Mastodon. Now, I would say, and grab your username on Mastodon. However, having had a little look, it's not that easy, because Mastodon has, on a quick look, different servers. So when you sign up, and this is where it's a bit techy, and I'm not sure how universal it will be, but I guess when we all started on Twitter, we were like, I don't get Twitter. How does Twitter work? And so maybe we'll just get Mastodon later. But essentially, when you go to sign up, you're asked to join via a server and pick a server via interest, which kind of makes sense in some ways, because you think, well, it does look a bit painful, particularly on signing up. So I thought, I'll go in, I'll have a look, and I'll grab my username. But your username is for the server you're on. So it denotes it to the server that you're on, and you can change servers at a later date. So it's not quite as straightforward as just being at Purple Dog UK, because you're at Purple Dog UK, at Mastodon app dot whatever it is, or at social Mastodon, or, so in some ways it kind of makes sense to have servers, because you go where you're interested, but servers can change and servers can appear, and who will be on what server, and until you're there, how do you know what's being said on what server? So it is a bit, so at the moment, I think there's probably a bit of a barrier, unless you're quite a techie individual, that you'll kind of be like, what? And even though the interface once you get on it in terms of posting is very similar to Twitter and that kind of thing, I think that might be a barrier. So, but it's too early to tell how that network's going to pan out. And again, it's worth then watching what happens with it, isn't it? And keeping an eye on progress and keeping up to trends. Has anyone else had a look at Mastodon yet? Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, Twitter's not my favorite platform either, but I do see the purpose, and for different things it does make sense as well, particularly when it's breaking news or it's sports and things like that, that Twitter does very much have its own place for journalists and stuff. Yeah, Ruth.
I've seen several people who I know online have gone over to Mastodon, and it sounds so complicated and difficult and horrible. I haven't even looked at it to think.
I think though, it's very easy to say that when it's new, isn't it? Because
it's true.
We said that about Twitter, and now like Twitter's like, well, Twitter's this, and you do hashtags, and you do this, and you search, and you but at first it was like, sorry, what, 180 characters, and that's all I can say. And so that's the thing, isn't it? Anything new is like confusing. But even like, like the NFPP award ceremony and things like that, and like when I did TEDx up here, Matthew said, should I be live tweeting? And I don't think there's that same effect that people would follow along at a live event now on Twitter that like they used to. And in fact, I've noticed where that happens is actually in Instagram stories. So people will follow along on Instagram stories now rather than on Twitter. So it's just noting, isn't it, those changes over time, whereas before people at home might have been following along via Twitter and following a hashtag and refreshing to see what happens. Now that's more likely to be, well, what's the latest Instagram story from that event? So it's just, the trend has changed, and it's just, having this time to take a step back and go, actually, it has changed. So therefore, what I'm doing should be changing, and do I really still need to be on Twitter if that's the case? Or if I do still need to be on Twitter, do I need to spend as much time on it? Do I need to focus my energy somewhere else and perhaps have a bigger strategy or a bigger focus on one of the other platforms? Rather just going, oh, I'm not on Twitter, you know, still monitor it, maybe watch what's going. It may turn around, you may not want to abandon it at this stage, but you may want to go, well, okay, while it's sorted itself out or not, let's put my energy in the first quarter or the first 2 quarters into a different platform and actually grow my audience, or look at the content I'm producing on that and see what difference that makes. So yes, so that brings us on to goals. And of course, they should align with your overall business goals. So before you start contemplating, you know, what kind of content you're going to make, who you're going to try and engage, what type of, whether it should be video, whether it should be text, or whether it should be links, you've got to look at what you're trying to achieve. So for each platform, and like we said, if you are across different platforms can have different goals because your purpose might be very different on those platforms. So these are some common social media goals for a strategy at the start of a plan. So it's very easy as well to look at that list, and I'm sure Karen will agree with me and go, well, I want to do all of those things. I want to increase my brand awareness, but I obviously want to drive traffic to my website, and of course I need to engage with my customers and build that community, but essentially I'm doing that to make sales and build leads. So yes, obviously we do have pretty much all of those overall goals for social media, but it is much easier to pick 1 or 2 to focus on for a quarter. And that's not to say you then don't move on perhaps to the next one, or have 2 parallel goals across a platform to get what you really want out of a platform. And it might be a 2-parter. It might be, well, actually, at the moment, before I can drive traffic to my website and generate leads and make sales, I need to boost my brand engagement and actually drive up my brand awareness to be able to then drive traffic to my website and engage with customers. And it might be that one has to become more of a focus before you step into the other one, or you make 2 goals around this area, and then you look at what percentage of your time and your content you're going to focus on these particular things. And you shouldn't necessarily have a goal for the whole year and that's your goal and that should be your only goal. You can change these over time, over the year, and be a bit more nimble with it, because the economic market changes, business changes, pandemics happen apparently, and so you need to then perhaps, you know, not have a plan, yes, but don't necessarily keep your head down and go, well, in 2022 in November I made a goal that I was going to do this and I was going to do that, and stick with it just blindly, because platforms change, you know, your business changes, your personal life changes on what you can achieve. So you do need to be realistic about it. So your goals therefore need to be smart, and you need to make them time bound. So we'll take a look at a couple of smart goals. So I'm sure all of you know what SMART means, but basically your goal should be specific. So it should be specific and it should be measurable, because if you don't have a metric that you can measure, how do you know whether or not you've been successful? And of course, you can't just say, I'm going to measure this, but then not put a time element to it, because again, when do you know if you've been successful? If you don't measure it within a certain time, how can you see over time if things are getting better or not? So you need to make them quite smart. And so these are some metrics that lend themselves to those types of goals. So if you wanted to increase brand awareness, in other words, grow your audience, reach more people, common types of metrics that you can look at to see if you are being effective in growing your brand awareness are: obvious one is number of followers, but that doesn't necessarily always translate to the right followers. So you can measure number of followers, but it might not be the only thing that you want to measure. You might want to measure the number of shares you're getting, so the number of short story shares you're getting, or the number of retweets, and the number of times your post is shared. That is quite hard to do for certain businesses. So again, it might not be the only metric you get, but one that's a bit easier to measure is post reach. So how many people have actually seen that? And of course, depending then on your engagement will then depend on how many people that goes out to. But you can start to then think about, once you've got a metric to measure, okay, well, if I want to do this, what sort of content do I need that's going to help me reach those and increase those numbers? So it all then starts to come together when you start thinking about it a bit more strategically. So we'll look at some examples in a minute, but drive website traffic, leads or sales. Well, obviously, the more sales you have, but you obviously want to track that they're coming from the right places. So it could be that you measure the number of clicks on links, either in the content itself, if the platform allows that, or in the bio or page profiles. So if people visit your profile, for example, on Instagram, how many people are clicking on a monthly or weekly basis on the link in your bio? That's one thing you could measure. Have you got email signups? And can you measure where they come from? And of course, can you do conversion tracking on sales? So drilling down into your Google Analytics, if you want to get really savvy about it, using what they call UTMs. Do people know what I mean by UTMs? So with Google Analytics, you can set up with certain websites. If you look up UTM Google links in your analytics profile, if you are really want to measure where your website traffic is coming from and what makes an impact, you can set up unique links. It's time consuming because you've got to do the hard work before. So you, like, if you want to link to a certain blog post and you want to link that to a measure if it's coming from a certain post, the reach, you can set down like they have UTMs on the end. So if you've ever seen that on a link, when you click through to it, what that's doing is it's measuring where that link is being clicked. So you can set it, well, I will set this direct link, this specific link, and I will only use that link on Facebook, and I will use this on Twitter. And then you can directly easily see where that traffic is coming from with those number of clicks. So it's not just the website, it's not just a link on your page, it's a specific link that you then use in those so you can do it with banner adverts, you can do it with all sorts of things, but you can also do it for social media and use it that way. But it's time consuming because you've got to set it all up, and you've got to set up the direct links, and then you've got to think about it. And Bitly links will also help as well. Yeah. So there's different things you can use to help you measure those things. So if driving website traffic is really your focus and you want to really drill down into the geeky analytics of where is that traffic then coming from, so that I can measure that activity, using those kind of tools like Bitly, like UTM links, or some WordPress sites have, you can use like pretty links and things like that, which then you'll set links per, but it takes that requirement thought process beforehand. But you might want to do it for certain campaigns, particularly if you're focused on a certain thing, or particularly if you're being asked to deliver on a certain project. They can then be really useful because it can help prove those things. And of course, your analytics do in social media insights do give you some information, but if you're trying to drive traffic and you're doing it across different platforms, that can be quite hard to see if it's coming from certain posts, for example, or certain activity that you've done. So that can be a useful tool. And then engagement, community building, which I'm guessing is it's important for all of us, but particularly important for Ruth with charity. And this is where then you look at things like the number of comments you're getting, the number of likes, that you're getting on a post, or hearts, or whatever it is, depending on the platform, the number of mentions you might get, and obviously then the number of shares. So that's really, and those are important metrics then that you can use. And I'll share a way of doing an engagement rate if you want to keep it quite simple, with a bit of a percentage, and then how you can compare it potentially to the overall platform, but then equally you can then look at yours month on month if you're not using a tool that will kind of do that for you, because some reporting tools, some of the platforms that you can use like Hootsuite and stuff might actually give you that engagement rate month on month, and you don't have to then calculate it. But if you haven't got access to those tools, there are other ways of doing it. And then equally, customer service might be very important. So to some industries, customer service is going to be a big thing. And so then you might measure things like, well, how long does it take you to get back to people? And if you've got a customer service team, you might want to monitor that on different individuals in the customer service team, because, you know, that's important. Or it might be, how many reviews are you getting, and what your reviews like? Are they all 5 stars, or are they going down or up, depending on what? So bigger companies, I guess, would monitor that more than perhaps, you know, the likes of myself, where I'm not going to, you know, I'm not necessarily IKEA with different response times and all those kind of things that I've got to monitor. But those are some examples of things that you can have. And then that is your kind of your metrics side of your SMART goal. But of course, your metrics have to be informed. They have to be realistic. I'm just going to let in, I don't know, who else is coming? Let's have a look. Sarah Carrick. Let's invite. So she's connecting to audio. So you obviously have to take stock of, if you're going to set yourself a goal. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, sorry I'm late.
That's
I didn't
all right.
get the link.
Ah, that Matthew's been poorly, so apologies if you didn't. This has been recorded, so you can always go back to the beginning. So we're just looking at setting goals, setting SMART goals, and at this point we're looking at setting realistic goals. So it's all very well, isn't it, saying, well, I'm going to grow my brand, and I'm going to get 5,000 more followers in the next 6 months. Is it realistic? And part of this is, like you were saying, Ruth, you know, how do you measure your engagement rate and things like that? It's got to be realistic to what you've already done as well, because there's no point in, if the platform's engagement rate is really low and you're near there or above there, or below there, but it's got to be realistic on what you've already been doing, rather than it being a massive stretch goal, because that's not helpful to anyone. So you've got to look at, where are you now? You've got to go back to some of your analytics, or whatever goal you set yourself, going and look at that platform, going and look at the metrics over the last certainly 6 months, if not year, and drilling down into those figures and taking a look at them, because you need to know where you are now, what the course of things has been so far, because you can't then make a realistic figure if it's nowhere near what you've already been doing. So you need to know your current metrics and rate of improvement before you can set a new realistic goal. And I'll give you an example in a minute that then I'm going to have to go back and revisit myself, that I started doing at the start of November when I started planning this for my Instagram, and why sometimes it can throw you a curveball. So you need to do a dive into your analytics. And once you've done this, you can then set a clear SMART goal. So I'm going to take the customer example first, and I'm going to do Twitter. So customer service. So here's an example, and then I'll share one that I was trying to put together for mine, but I now need to revisit already. So an example of a good SMART goal for social media marketing would be something like, we're going to increase our Twitter response rate by 25% by the end of the first quarter. So it's a targeted, smart, numbered goal that has a time to it and a metric that you can measure. Use Heat for making me reset my heart every time I do it for, yeah, I know that feeling. But there are other platforms out there, Ruth, that might be quite useful. Later.com is quite good. It has a free trial, and you can get quite a number of your profiles on it, and I think you can schedule up to like 30 posts for free across the profiles, but then you do need to pay more for things like analytics and reels scheduling and all those kind of things. But it might be worth looking at if Hootsuite drove you crazy. Yeah. Oh yeah, you use Creative Suite, Karen. I don't use that because I know it can be so buggy, but it has the advantage of obviously being a free tool, and if you're focusing on Instagram and Facebook, it will be the first one that, or it should be, that gets those features like being able to tag products easier, or being able to schedule stories or schedule reels, other than third-party tools, because it is actually run by Instagram and Facebook. So it should theoretically be first for doing those things. Not always the case, but, and also now's a good time to review your tools, particularly if you're changing platforms or need to measure certain different things. Are your tools helping you that? Yep, we can talk about size of pictures in a minute as well. Remind me at the end, write it down because I'll forget. So let's break down this, where this goal came from for this case study, if you like. So it is specific because they've specifically identified the social platform for a start, Twitter, and they've identified a metric, so the response rates, and therefore it's measurable because the response rate they can measure with a social media tool, so they can look at the timing and all those kind of things. Achievable, they didn't make it outlandish, and that, you know, we're gonna get back to everybody immediately within a certain time frame. So, and you know, we're going to immediately upscale our efforts to do that. And you might be able to if you bring in a number of team members and train them all up very quickly. You might be able to, but you've got to put in some resource to do that. So it's being realistic about what's achievable. So relevant, our goal will have an impact on our overall social media presence, making it very relevant. Well, it will be if it's customer service and you get a lot of customer service inquiries and support. That's going to obviously help deliver and keep your customers happy, isn't it? So it's relevant to the business in that respect. And it's time bound. The goal has to be met by the end of the first quarter. That means you can measure. You know, you could look at it weekly, or you could look at it monthly. How are you progressing towards that goal? Before you get to the end of the quarter, rather than just getting to the end of the quarter and go, oh, we didn't do it. Because ideally you should look at it along the way to say, well, are we going to hit it? What do we need to do? What do we need to change to be able to meet that goal, if that is the case? So here's another one that I tried to do at the start of November. So for example, I've said already, for me, my main focus at the moment is on Instagram, and I've been struggling to grow my brand, increase my reach on Instagram, where I've been steadily gaining in followers. So I was like, right, I'm going to next year grow my number of followers but to 5,000 by the 1st of July. And I was at the end of October around 2,731. So even then, it sounds doable, but actually when I looked at my analytics and insights, it was going to be a bit of a stretch. So yes, it was specific. I've identified my social channel, and I've identified a metric. And it is measurable because I have a social media tool, Sprout Social, that I can measure the number of followers. I can also just go into the app and actually look at them as well. But if I forget where I was, that's helpful. And was it achievable? And this is where I said it was a bit of a stretch, because if I look back at my stats for the last 6 months, my follower growth had been roughly at an average of 1% every month, which when I did the maths, I could have done it in a spreadsheet, which would have been way easier. But when I did the maths, that meant I would be just shy of 3,000 followers by July 2023. So actually, whilst it sounded like an achievable figure, if I was going to carry on along the same track and just up it a little bit, it would have been tough to reach 5,000 followers. So I knew it was going to be a stretch goal. And so I have to think about, well, okay, what do I need to do that's different to really help me do that? And so I know, for example, that by producing Instagram reels, you go out to your non-followers much easier. And so I thought, right, well, I need to focus on my reel strategy, not just produce reels, because I want to still serve my existing followers. So it's not like I will only do this and I will only focus on this, but to help me reach this particular target, I will need to focus more on my reels. And the reason why that's relevant to me is because I want to deliver more training and create more courses. So to be able to justify that and do that, I'm going to need a larger audience, because who am I going to sell my courses to otherwise? So I need to grow my brand awareness to be able to do that. And so I've set myself a goal of the end of July. Now, the reason why I say I now need to look at this again and why I guess focusing on my reel strategy was perhaps something I should have definitely been looking at, is because I've been fortunate enough, I don't know if you've looked at my Instagram recently, but I've been fortunate enough that one of my reels has actually trended. And so it's I made a Christmas easy reel to make reel, and so it's had at the moment, and I think I did it on the 9th of November, 3.4 million views, which is crazy, and therefore my follower count has shot up. So, but I couldn't have necessarily planned to go viral, because it doesn't work like that. So my follower count is now at 5768. So so that I've kind of surpassed that goal. Now, what I don't know at this stage, and this is why it now becomes hard for me to make a goal, is this has never happened to me before, where I've had a reel go viral. And it's gone viral because it was timely, it was helpful, it was good quality, and it was just as a Christmas audio was starting to trend. So it's lucky in a number of ways. It's strategy in some ways, but a lot of luck as well, in the sense that I've been able to, obviously people are wanting to start to promote their Christmas events, their Christmas products. I gave them a reel that was easy to do and utilize, which meant it got saved, it got shared, it got watched over and over again, so that people could follow how to do it. So there's a number of things that have fallen together for that to happen. Now, what's never happened to me before is, now what happens? So I've had a load of followers follow me. Obviously, I'm not going to follow them all back, because I don't just follow for follow. I follow people that make sense for me to follow in that way. Will they stay? Do they all disappear? Do they all unfollow in a number of weeks? I don't know what that's likely to look like for me. Obviously, I've got to create more content to help onboard those followers, so it's difficult to know. And that's at a time when actually, as in sort of around Christmas time, engagement generally drops across the platforms, because people are busy, they're not on social media, or they're with family, or they're at events and things. So naturally there's that kind of drop off point. So it is quite hard to for me to know what's going to happen. And just because I've got one viral reel doesn't mean to say that they're all going to go in the same way. Do you know what I mean? And I can't just create reels, because I want to serve my existing audience and give value in different ways. So I can't just go, oh, well, I'll just do that forever. And equally, again, that's not going to convert them. So I've got to think about the balance of content. So you can't just have one goal and only focus on that goal. But by thinking about this goal, I know if I want to do this, or if I want to set a new figure, I know that I do need to think about my reel content and think about my reel strategy and think about how often am I going to post them, because I've only been posting one a week. And for me, that's been working up until now. But if I want to reach this stretch goal, or if I had wanted to reach a stretch goal, I know that perhaps maybe I need to increase my reel content to 2 a week. And what sort of reels do I need to create? And then what sort of content will then go behind that to, follow up and convert behind it? And what activities do I need to be doing outside of that rather than just gaining followers. There's no point in having loads of followers if I don't then convert them. So it's thinking about these things all together. So thinking about how you are going to reach your goal is then going to help you. Once you've got your goal, you then need to put a plan into action about how you're going to meet that goal. So for me, I knew I was going to have to focus more on real strategy. And then, but equally, what am I going to do behind that real strategy to keep that audience engaged and converted? So then that helps you then think about the sort of content that you're going to make and the sort of, so it, for me, the reels would need to be educational to bring people over. And then the content that I make then behind that needs to support that. I need to engage with people, but equally at some point I'm going to need to put in some sales type post to hopefully convert that. So there needs to be a kind of a plan as to when I do that. And so that will help you then think about, you know, your planning, your content over that period of time. How are you going to do that? But also you need to think about like other events you've got going on, other, you know, there's no point in going hard or over the Christmas period, for example, and no one's there because they're all eating Christmas turkey and sat in front of the fire with the kids. So you need to bear in mind like what time of year it is, what the industry is like at that time, but also upcoming trends. So what's predicted to be happening in 2023. So post 5, yeah. See, you post 5 times a week on Instagram. See, this is the other thing, isn't it? Where there is a huge discrepancy on what the experts say on posting frequency on different platforms. And that's something else you need to look at. Are you posting too much? Are you posting enough if you want to achieve those things? And also in terms of your capacity. So 5 times a week, I don't do that on Instagram, not on posts. What I've been doing recently is 2 or 3 posts a week, certainly 2, and I do carousel posts, and then 1 reel a week, and occasionally I'll do another, and then stories on top. But you know, the focus is really to do 2 or 3 good quality posts on Instagram a week rather than trying to do loads. Because I find as well, not everyone, you know, people get sick of people if they're scrolling down. They can only engage with so much of your content. You don't want to compete with yourself. So you need to think about, that's good that they're tagging you in things now as well. That's helpful as well, because that helps build your audience growth. But Reels will help you reach new audiences. So if that is something that you're trying to achieve, then that is something that you need to look at building into your strategy, because it's going to help you reach new people. So then if you know that you've got to, for example, learn this new skill, put time and effort into that, to weigh that up, you either then need to increase your resource and your time you're spending on it, or you need to go, well, actually, I'm going to do 1 reel a week and 2 posts rather than 5 posts across the week. And then look at what that does to the analytics. So then that's how it works, isn't it, in terms of measuring it. So yeah, again, if you want to look at changing your strategy and changing your content, Karen, so that it's more reels and carousels that you're not sure about, you might need to set aside some time to spend learning and looking at how different accounts do that, how you might go about it. And actually, because you're investing that time, reduce the amount of times you're posting and focus on that. So for the charity, Ruth says in November, we're posting a memory of people we've lost. So see 3 posts a day, individuals wouldn't dare drop that at the moment. No. And that's the thing, isn't it? So you just got to, yeah, you've got to be conscious of what is happening in the world as well. And either using that to your advantage or being very, I mean, some people, like I was going to post, I was at an awards night the night the Queen died, and I was like, follow along on Instagram. Oh, don't follow along on Instagram stories. I'm not going to be posting to Instagram stories about being at an awards night drinking and celebrating, am I, as the Queen's just died. You have to be conscious of the world events as well. But the general trends for 2023 are people want authenticity. So what does that mean? Well, they want to connect with individuals and connect with the businesses in a better way. They want to understand the reasons behind the business. They want to see the real person behind the business, and they're more likely to connect with individuals that perhaps put themselves out there a bit or show a bit more behind the scenes than perhaps some of the bigger brands can do. So, you know, it's not very easy for Nike to show the inner workings of their business, whereas the smaller businesses can share some of that, make it more relatable to people. And it might mean that you do, you know, one of the reasons bite-sized video, the short form video, has been so successful is because it's really hard for the likes of myself as a social media manager to create content for other businesses in that form, because it needs to come, it's easier to come in a more timely manner from the business owner or the business or people within the business. And one of the reasons it's been successful is because it tends to be more authentic and people do get to know the real people behind it. So yeah, don't stop what's working, Karen. If something's working, you don't stop it. That's it. And that's the thing, isn't it? It's looking at those analytics. You probably knew some of that on a hunch without looking at analytics. You know your Tested Tuesdays are doing perhaps better than some of your other posts. But if it's working, you don't stop that. You just add, you change different things. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, you wouldn't drop those. And if they're in a format that people are sharing, I mean, you could experiment maybe with changing one of them up for video and seeing what difference that makes. And if it doesn't do as well, go back to the old format. If it progresses better, maybe bring more of that mix in. And that's just it, isn't it? You don't necessarily stop doing what was working, but you can experiment a little bit with it in that, you know, using a different format maybe and seeing if that goes even higher. But it might mean that it doesn't go as well, so then take it back. And the other thing that's becoming quite big is collaboration. And that's businesses, individuals working together. And some of that is using what they call influencers, and particularly micro-influencers, to help you grow your brand. Or it might be working together with a business or an individual on a project to share. So like yesterday, was it yesterday? Time goes so quickly. So like I've got a contact here in Wales who I've met in person, who's lovely, in Carmarthen, completely unrelated to what I do. She's a conservator, which basically is like a repairman, museum. I mean, Ruth will probably know. So she repairs stuff basically. So she's like the repair shop. And so she works with museums and works on getting things back to their original format. But she approached me and she said, I've noticed there's obviously a lot of chat because she's neurodivergent. She says there's a lot of helpful information. Well, there's not a lot of helpful information. There's some information out there about how you can help certain people with disabilities on social media and make your posts, effective for all. So there's the more obvious things like using alt tags for the visually impaired. You know, there's the considering your use of emojis, and obviously then for the deaf, putting captions over, video content where they can't hear. She said, but there's nothing about really what's best for neurodivergent type people. And she sort of approached me and said, would you like to do something on this and collaborate with me on it? I was like, yeah. So we had a chat about yesterday, and probably in the new year we will do a collaboration on how to tailor your posts to make them more neurodivergent friendly, for example. So there's different ways that you can work with different people to help you both grow your brand and earn that know, like, and trust, because that's what it's about as well. Is there a minimum and maximum amount of time that bites should? Well, this is really interesting because it depends on what you're trying to achieve and what your goal is, Sarah. Because if your video is an instructional video, then it might need to be longer and different platforms have different lengths, but even the likes of like TikTok have now got 10-minute videos. I've not seen a great deal of 10-minute videos on TikTok. Having said that, if you are trying to maximize reach and number of views, because the algorithm sees number of views as a trigger, and if people are engaging them with that video, then I have found 7 seconds is a good video length to get repeat increased views. It's short, it's snappy, people you know, can watch the whole thing whilst they're scrolling. They've still got to stop to watch 7 seconds, but they will stop to watch 7 seconds, then they perhaps will spend 10 minutes watching a video. And they're more likely to perhaps watch it again because the information's gone quick. So that tells Instagram, oh, this person's watching it more than once, particularly then if they like or comment on it or save it to come back to it. That's a factor. Now, depending on what you are trying to achieve, that's not overly, you know, a 7-second video isn't necessarily going to help you achieve your goal. So you have to weigh all of those kind of things up. I will do longer videos, and sometimes you just can't get information into a 7-second, 15-second video. You have to make it longer. So you have to adapt it in that format. And maybe there needs to be, you could do like an advert, because think of them like adverts. They're essentially adverts, aren't they? Like you see in between, I'm a celebrity, get me out of here. You know, they're snippets of information that ideally should convert someone to want to go and look more at the other things you have on offer, whether that's your other post, whether it's your website, all those kind of things. So you could do like a teaser, and then, you know, in the caption, drive them to find out more in another location, you know, and that's your call to action. So there are different things that you can do. So yeah, so these are the trends, and the general trend, whether you like it or not, and we don't like it because it's more time consuming, but whether we like it or not, across social media platforms, the most engaging in-feed social media content at the moment across the board is short form video. So at some point, you are going to have to get on board with social media video. And there are different ways of doing it. So you can look at the different ways of doing it. The best thing to do is study it on different platforms, see what different people are doing, see how long different ones are. And you can look at the view counts on people's generally and see how many they've been played, so you can get an idea for that. They do tend to have, what I do know is, certainly on Instagram and probably other platforms too, they do have a longer life shelf. So yes, they do take longer to make and potentially think about and twist than perhaps a normal static post, although carousels sometimes can take me just as long. But they last longer. So, you know, my Instagram post carousel that I did 2 days ago now will not be getting new eyeballs on it. Whereas my Instagram reel that I made over 10 days ago is still gaining followers, traction, views. So it has a longer lasting effect. Sometimes, in fact, a reel can, you're like, oh, that died on its then, didn't it? And then like a week later, it's like, oh, now it's going, now it's starting to get views. How does, you know, so it does have a longer sort of knock-on effect. So what do I use for my videos? I use a mixture of things, and I'll let you into a little secret. Don't tell anyone on my Instagram reel that's trending at the moment. I use a mixture of things. So sometimes I'll record myself in app on Instagram for the video content for Instagram, that is, and edit it in Instagram. Sometimes I'll use InShot, particularly if I want to speed up video and things like that afterwards. Sometimes I'll use a mixture of the two. InShot's an app that you can actually buy outright rather than having to pay a monthly subscription on, but it is on your phone, and both of those are on your phone, and I do find that quite fiddly. And given the choice, I would much prefer to use my desktop, but desktop hasn't quite caught up on vertical video editing yet. Jan, who's normally on these calls, Jan Sherwood, has a good tip, particularly as you get older and fatter fingers. She uses the apps on her iPad because they're bigger. It's much easier to edit and scroll and things. So that's one tip. If you're having to do mobile, perhaps use it on a bigger device. So it's still the same app, but it's on a different, larger device. Sometimes I'll use Canva. And in fact, the video that I started that's trending is actually Canva stock footage. And then I've downloaded it, taken it into Instagram, and then used the Instagram text overlap editing, trending audio from Instagram, job done. So, actually that one wasn't too hard to put together once I come up with the idea and the strategy and the call to action, and found the right audio that was just starting to trend as luck would have it. So I will use a mixture of things. If I'm doing longer form video, I'll quite often use screen sharing tools. So I'll use screen sharing because of what I do. Obviously, I'm teaching a lot. So I'll use Loom, which is a recording tool, and then I'll more than often than not top and tailor in something like iMovie, because that still works landscape, and that will work quite nicely on Facebook and Facebook groups and then on websites and things. But that's not, iMovie still hasn't caught up where I can do vertical video editing. So then it's gonna, even if I'm either gonna have to turn my head to see what I'm looking at, or I'm gonna have to crop it afterwards, which is obviously reducing the video quality. So you have to think about that, because then the platforms don't like downgraded video quality. So there's those sort of things. And sometimes I'll just use the screen recording on my phone to do a demo as well. So yeah, those are the tools I mostly use, but there are others out there like Adobe Express. And I think Adobe is one of the ones that actually gives you a tool, isn't it? You can do it vertically. It's one of the few ones I found that you can use on a desktop that does let you do it vertically. So yeah, vertical video. So basically, Karen, it's that way rather than that way, because most people will now film on a mobile. And so the likes of TikTok and Instagram are that way. So if you're making video content, you make it that way rather than that way, because if you make it that way and then have to crop it, you're reducing the quality, or it comes on landscape on your feed rather than that way, and Instagram doesn't push it. Yeah, and interestingly, when I was back in the forest, I think Sarah and Karen were there, we talked about links. And of course, if one of your, and for most people it is, well, I want to drive people to my website page, because that's where they're more likely to purchase and buy and contact me and learn more. One of the hardest things, and it makes sense if you think about it really, but it doesn't help, is that one of the least engaging things to do is to shove a link on every single post that you have, because funnily enough, the likes of Instagram, Facebook, etc., Twitter don't want you to click on the link and go somewhere else, because they want to keep you in Facebook, Twitter and Instagram, because that's where they make their money, by keeping you on that platform, because they can show you more ads the more time you're on it. So obviously, if you want to drive traffic to your website, you are going to have to use links at some point to be able to do so. But it's how do you use those links, and making sure not all your posts are link-based posts, because that's not going to help you get those posts seen all the time. So it's different ways of using links in your content, or maybe even in a Facebook post, because most people know, don't they? Yes, if it's to a product, can you tag the product? That might be easier. Can you drive them perhaps to a button on your Facebook, rather than saying, a bit like you do with link in bio with Instagram, can you drive them to click on a button, or say head to our website? Most people will know how to do that from Facebook occasionally, or some people get around this by They'll do their initial post, schedule their initial post, and then they'll add the link in the comments. So it's not part of that original post on Facebook. So that can then help, you know, there's strategic ways of getting your links in there without making them always part of the post. And sometimes it's timely to put the link in the post, but it's not necessarily the thing to do all the time if you're trying to drive traffic to your website, because that is not going to work as a long-term strategy. So we're talking about how we're going to reach our goals. So then once we've thought about that, then we've got the content strategy to think about, haven't we? And it starts talking about the content that you're going to reach, whilst timely remembering, you know, certain times of the year that you have to be conscious of, and events. So what content then do you need to help you hit your goals? So what sort of content is going to help you reach those goals? So like I've said, for Instagram, for me, I know it's going to have to be short form video that I'm going to do more, but I can't just churn out any old video. I need to think about the sort of video that's going to be most effective to the most people and the most helpful to the most people, that isn't necessarily salesy, because what I'm trying to do is grow at this stage. But then I'm also going to want a content mix that then kind of follows up on that behind that, because I don't just want to grow my audience. Ideally, I want to do something with them. So it's thinking about those things. And is it then, do I then get them onto my email list or in my Facebook group? What's my funnel, if you like, from that you need to think about? And so at all times, really, you do want a mix of content. You want a mix of promotion content so that you are actually helping reach those leads, those conversions, those sales, but not just that, you know, at most 20% that. And then you want inspiring posts, you want educational posts, you want entertaining posts, if that's right for your business. So I can create as many educational reels as I like, but if I never then create the posts behind them that drive people to take action or work with me in some way, to come on a workshop, or, you know, sign up for a course or sign up to my email list, that, you know, is not going to be helpful as part of my overall strategy on what my overall business goal is. So then, as we've talked about, when and how often do you need to post to reach your goal? You know, and what should that mix of content be based on the different things that you're trying to achieve? Yeah, definitely. And it's a bit like the old book that's still valid, even if you're not a massive fan of, what's his name, Gary Vaynerchuk. You know, it's jab, jab, right hook, isn't it? So you're giving, and then you come in. So it's most definitely, you'll never, unless someone has had a few glasses of wine when they're on social media, unless you've built that relationship and that sort of value with people first, they're not necessarily going to buy for you, unless it's just very timely that they happen to see your post as they were about to, oh, I need something to do with the kids' weekend, and then Hearst-Castle pops up, you know, unless it's really like, oh, that's a good idea, that'll do. But equally, they won't be following you if they don't already know about Hearst-Castle and all those kind of things. So, you know, you need to add value and grow and build that know, like, and trust factor before you sell. Yeah, most definitely. Think of it like, it's like a pub. It's a social network, isn't it? So think of it like a pub. If someone's just talking and not listening, it's very much that. And even like on the reel I've done, like this morning, I was just Google translating Portuguese. I was Google translating Portuguese to be able to answer a question about how you add the audio, use the audio on the reel, so that I could say back in Portuguese, well, what you doing is you hit the sound of the button. Obviously, I am no Portuguese, so I had to actually write using Google Translate in Portuguese. This is what you do. So yeah, it's also following up on the engaging content that you're making and responding and engaging with your audience. So conscious of the time, particularly if we've got questions. So this is where now, you know, you've thought about your goal, you thought about your time, you thought about specifics, you thought about, is it realistic? You thought about the platform it's going to be on. You've thought about then the content that you need to make to help you do that, and how often you're going to post, and then the mix of stuff that needs to go behind that to help you fulfill that goal. this is where you then need to look at, okay, well, do I now need to look at additional things that I need to do to help me reach this goal? So do I need additional tools that are going to help me with this? So like we said, there might be scheduling tools like Later or Buffer or Hootsuite that are going to help you in terms of measuring a metric, that you're not going to have to sit down and go, right, in October, my follower views were 2731, add 1% to that. And then it should it's a quicker way of doing that. And if it's important for you to reach that goal, is that something that you need to invest in, for example? Do you need to look at something like software that you haven't yet looked at? So do you need to perhaps look at Canva or Adobe Express or InShot, a tool that's going to help you make graphics or video that you haven't previously been able to do to help you reach that goal? Or is it hardware? Do you need a new phone with a good camera, or do you want an iPad because you are struggling with fat fingers on Instagram editing? And if you're going to do that and do that properly, is that something you need to think about? Do you need to learn more about something? Do you need to build in time? Like Carol was saying, she doesn't know a lot about carousels and she doesn't know a lot about reels. So does she need some time to go down the depths of Google and YouTube, or invest in a course, depending on what budget and time is, to learn those things to get better at it, to help you achieve those goals on a specific platform? Is it actually you just don't have time and you don't want to learn, and it would be better to outsource some of these things? So if you need more graphics, do you need a graphic designer, or can you get a freelancer to do certain things, or build you templates at least to save you time? Or do you add people to your team, or do you look at who's in your team already that could perhaps help you with it in a different way? Are there people that you collaborate with that's going to help you reach those goals quicker? Are there micro influencers in a certain area that you could talk to, that you could collaborate with? Or are there just businesses that you could collaborate with and look at doing things in a different way? So that these are the times to sort of then sit down and think, well, okay, that's my goal. How can I now, or what do I need now to help you reach that? And then, of course, you've set a timely goal. How often are you going to review your progress along the way? How often are you going to check in to see if you're on track, to see if what you are doing is working, or if you need to change tack? So like Karen says about her Test Tuesday, and I said, well, try a video and see what happens. That's working already. The content's working. What happens if you change the format? Could it reach even more people? So she could experiment, do a couple of videos spread out and see what difference they make. But if she's not reviewing and going back in and looking at the analytics within a certain time period, she's not going to see if it's worked or not. And by the time she gets to her goal, then's not the right time to review it. Yes, an overall review at that time in the 6 months or whatever it is going to be necessary, but it's not going to help you inform how things are changing as you go along and whether things are working. So you need to do that. You need to adjust goals and strategies as they go on if they're not working for you. So obviously at the end, you then need to do your review, and it does move fast. So maybe don't set a goal for the whole year. There's new networks emerging, as we've already talked about. Maybe we will all be on Mastodon this time. We all come together. Who knows? So we'll be like, do you remember when we said how hard Mastodon was? Maybe not. But others go through demographic shifts, as we already talked about, and your business will go through periods of change. And we've probably got some change coming up economically over the next couple of months, and you might have to review your content and what you're doing, and budgets and people. And so that's, going to make an impact on what you can achieve and what platforms you might need to be on or not be on. So all of this means that, unfortunately, your social media marketing strategy should be a living document, I hate to say, and that you should review and adjust as needed and refer to it as often as you need to stay on track. Don't be afraid to make changes that, or wipe that goal and go, actually, I need to be focusing on this now. As long as you can justify why you're changing, if you've got a boss, then that's fine, isn't it? And equally, you can then show them why it's realistic or not realistic to perhaps be obtaining something, particularly if they then don't give you any budget or resource to do it. So you can use your analytics to help you explain why that may or may not be realistic based on your current budget and resource. So yeah. So there are some questions that we've already have. So I'm going to try and remember them. And if not, obviously put them in chat or shout on what we've done so far. So one thing was TikTok and percentages. So whilst it is Gen Z at the moment, interestingly, there's more females than I always think there will be on TikTok, which I was quite surprised at when I saw those stats. But we think of it as a younger platform, but there are older people on the platform and it's increasing. So you do need to think about, you know, what are these people doing? Are they going to be more and more active as, you know, are more of us going to come over to this? So it's, you know, it's that kind of thing, isn't it? Where, you know, it's thinking about those things. Now, some of this engagement stats, here you go. And I'll find how to work out the engagement rate because it's maths, I'm rubbish at maths. I'll find the exact formula for you in a minute, Ruth. But engagement rates comparing platforms, engagement rate on TikTok is 5.96%, which is huge. Doesn't sound like a lot, but it's huge when you start comparing it to other platforms. Facebook, 0.07%. So you compare that to TikTok, you go, okay. So, and then link posts, as we know, see the lowest engagement rate. In fact, while we're on Facebook, because it's one of the platforms that most of us are on, photo posts still win on Facebook, possibly because it's that slightly older audience, and status posts still do, like the inbuilt meta posts. Link posts are worse, video posts are fairly average, but I think that will come up. Instagram is 2.88%. So again, but people are, so here is the stat, because I've taken this from the other one. So your engagement rate, Ruth, is a simple way of doing it. You can add other factors in if you want to, particularly if you know other factors like saving posts are a big thing that happen for you, for example, on Instagram or Facebook. Or you can add in retweets, but basically you're adding and keeping that consistent, like your likes and your comments. So likes and comments are one that you can do generally, divided by the number of followers, because it's how many of your followers that you're therefore engaging on each post, times by 100. So you can get a general idea then. You can build in saves, you can build in shares if you want to per post, but that's the simple way of doing it. You're dividing it by your number of followers, what you consider engagement factors to be, and then just use that across the board so that you're keeping it consistent. So there were some other questions, weren't there? What were the other questions? Remind me. Karen, you had some. Do you want me to unmute you? I can ask to unmute. Let me scroll back through and see. So
sorry, I was looking to see where I wrote it down, but I can't remember. I think it was about Instagram stories, possibly.
Okay, you've also said about the size of pictures.
Oh, that was it. The size of the pictures. Yeah, you got it.
So do you mean on Instagram?
No, I just put a picture up and we put it on Facebook and we used Meta What's the Space.
Yeah.
And we used the same picture.
Yeah. So with Instagram, you can do either landscape, which I wouldn't advise. You can do square. This is images now, or you can do portrait size. Yeah. And if I come out of this, stop showing.
So if you're using the same picture for Facebook and Instagram, would you recommend just doing a square one?
Square is easiest. However, portrait still works on Facebook to an extent. You can experiment. So then let me see if I can share my phone.
Most of my pictures I've downloaded onto my PC and then we put copyright on them. So they're all there, and that's what we use for our posts. Let me show you very briefly. Can we see my phone? Hang on. Oh, is it gonna download the
It's updated recently. Is it going to let me do it?
Let you edit a photo used on both Facebook and Insta, just for Insta.
Right, let me come in and out. Stop mirroring and then start mirroring. Can we see my phone yet? No. Let me stop share and start again. Hang on.
Said you'd started
Just-
screen sharing.
Yeah, see.
My
Zoom's
internet's
updated
rubbish. I'm
recently.
amazed I can still see you all.
So let me do. If not, I'll do it another way. This is why you always have. It's not. So let me stop that way. Let me bring up this and do it that way instead. You'll see my messy desktop, but hey ho. Right, so now let me try sharing to. Is that going to work? Are you going to work? Right. Let's try again. Right, bear with, because there's quite a few questions re mobile. Right, is that working? Unless it's my internet today. Right, okay. So let me now share my very messy desktop, which now has my phone on it. Can we see that now?
Yep.
So can you see, like, I don't know what's coming up on my feed, but can you see this post, Karen? The DW comms post. This is not a square post. This is a portrait size post, and it takes up pretty much the whole of my screen as I come into my phone, doesn't it? If I scroll down, that's a video. Can you see it? A lot of people are doing portraits now. That's a square post. Can you see I'm already into the next person as a distraction? So on Instagram, if you're wanting more of an impact, the portrait size posts are a good idea. And you can see the landscape, that one there, makes very little impact on the phone. I'm already watching, like, being drawn into the video below it. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So if you want to make more of an impact with your sizes, then the portrait post on Instagram in particular is a good size to do. And you're going to ask me, what's that size now, aren't you? And I just use Canva, but let me put in Instagram portrait and it will come up. It's 1080 by, just did it, and then by 1350 pixels.
Thank you.
Because it's just that little bit taller. And actually, if you, I'm trying to remember if I've ever whacked that into a Facebook post, which I'm sure I have. Has anybody else done it? I'm sure it looks okay in the feed. Have you done it, Ruth? Does it look all right?
Sorry, can't type quick enough. Yeah, I do that quite a bit, to be honest, if I'm really short of time, because I'll schedule my Facebook and Insta at the same time a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And if I'm short of time, I'll do an Insta Canva template and put it, and it works fine on Twitter as well. So yeah.
Yeah.
But what
Yeah,
I was saying before, Karen, if you if you've got Planner, if you're using Facebook, I use the Facebook Meta Planner.
Yeah.
When you on, and I'll put when I'm putting specific images in, I'll put them on Facebook and Instagram, and it gives you the option to edit it for Instagram on there, just for Instagram.
Yeah.
So it's me knowing where to go in this meta thingy.
It's literally as you as you're scheduling it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll go and maybe have a play when we get a minute. And
there's a delete. You know, there's the delete button, the bin, and there's the pencil button, which is edit. And it'll tell you if the picture's not going to work on Insta, it tells you, and you can edit.
That's the one good thing about those kind of
so
things.
I think we've just been chucking them in square, and if that makes a difference, because you can see the way it takes your eye to the next one.
That's it.
That could make a difference with us. So it's always worth a try.
All these little things can make a difference. Once you've got your template set up, you've got your template set up, haven't you? That's the thing. Save those times. Got your size set up, and then you just whack your photo in. So yeah. Do we have any more questions? There was one right at the start. wasn't there, that I said I'll show you on my phone, and now I can't remember what it was.
Yeah, that was me, because I was having posts. So I want my stories to share on both platforms, but I want
That's
my
it. So
Instagram
You
is sharing my posts as well.
So when you come in to share a post, God knows what's on my so when you come in to share a post, just an ordinary post, can you see, it's cheeky because I've started sharing, because I don't really do Facebook, I've started sharing my stories to Facebook. But can you see it's put it on automatically on right down at the bottom, is toggled Facebook on, which I would never do. I would never share my Instagram posts because of the hashtags and all those kind of things and the mentions directly to Facebook. So you need to make sure it's toggled off before you post. The other thing I think you can do is in your settings, I'm pretty sure somewhere, you're going to ask me where, but I'm not sure, I'll find it quickly, is
Set the default not to that, yeah?
Yeah, you can find the, you know, there is somewhere in here where you don't automatically share to. It's not set as the default. But could I find that right now while
I was looking for, that's where I was looking for it in there, and I couldn't find it.
It's not going to be accounts setting.
That's going to be your homework then, Becky.
Yeah.
You just went past it. It said sharing to other
There you go.
accounts.
Where was it? Was I in a
I don't know. I was trying there.
Yeah.
Sharing to
Going to
other
other
accounts.
apps. So you can connect them here, but I don't
Hang on,
know if
I've
you can
lost
set your
it, so-
settings. So yeah. So if you really never want to cross share, take them off, and that way, you know. But yeah, there is a
Where
way.
was that? I'm
Hmm?
sharing to other apps. Hang on a minute.
Yeah.
So what have you got into account?
I've gone into account, yeah. So I've gone
Sharing to
into
other apps.
3 menu items at the top, and then I've gone into settings. But it could also be on activity.
Hmm.
Do you know what I mean? They keep changing these. This is the thing. What's on your activity? Time spent? No.
Okay, as long as I just make sure it's not on when I go in each post.
Yes, that's the thing to do, because it can default on. So that's
Yeah.
worth checking. But yeah, most of it's going to be in settings. Most of the tools you want to toggle on or off are going to be in settings. And the same goes with, even if you've got it on for your Instagram stories, you can, when you start a new one, see mine's off now, but if you toggle by pressing on the very bottom of the button where it says your story, it's gone now, isn't it? Typical, she says. Let's delete once it's loaded. Delete. So Rebecca's pressed the wrong button. Has it done it? Right, so you can, where you go to story, let's click on this image. You can obviously toggle on to go to close friends in your story. Now, if you're massive and you want to share certain things with just certain posts, you could use this almost like a group on Facebook, but not quite in the same way, although groups does seem to be coming to Instagram. If you click on the button at the far right before you just click yes, your story, you can then toggle your sharing options here. So if you want to turn them on and off for different posts, you can do. So where it's got like your sharing options, there's an arrow, and then you can share it to Facebook only once, or you can turn off Facebook or on Facebook story sharing as default when you come in to do it as well. So that's a quick way of going into your stories as well. Were there any other questions? Probably loads, but
You've made another one. You just said that groups are coming to Instagram.
they're testing it at the moment.
Okay.
It's not rolled out yet, same as scheduling. It's
So I'll keep an eye on your
directly
social
scheduling
media and you'll
Instagram.
tell us, will you?
I will try to, because like some people have got, for example, on Reels, I don't think I've got it yet. Let me make a really exciting reel very quickly. Exciting reel very quick. Some people have got, oh, I've got it now. Woo! Topics. Can you see
No.
additional features if you're looking at my phone? Do you still see my phone?
Oh yeah,
So-
add topics.
On my reel where I would write a caption, I've now got the ability, these are new literally to me today, add message button. and add topics. So now, and this is slowly being rolled out to different accounts, so I can now come in and I can say, this reel will appeal to, and who do I want, what on my target market having interest in. So particularly, you know, and this is where it gets, it's not so brilliant for business necessarily, but small business would definitely be one that I would tick, and you can tick up to 3. I might, let's see what else is relevant. I mean, I probably would tick commerce and entrepreneurship, or maybe even not teaching methods. Entrepreneurship, commerce are probably going to be most realistic for me. But equally, if I was trying to target, if I was niching down to a particular, like if I was making a reel about how to make your travel reel, you know, exciting, or how to put together a travel reel, then I'd look at the travel section and target it that way. Or if I was targeting artists and how artists might want to use reels to showcase their work, then I could check these different things. So you can then sort of drill it down a bit more, and some of them are useful, some of them are not. There are see more on some. So
is that only for the reels, or
that's for the reels?
It won't come up with those topics for just
no. So this is for reels to help you kind of target your audience a bit more. And it's new, as in literally yesterday I didn't have this feature when I looked for it. And interestingly as well, there's now an add message button. So where do I want, like on Facebook, you can now add, can't you, like a banner over the top of your post, send message or see menu or something on some posts. This is where I can perhaps get a direct message. So if my call to action is, you know, send me a direct message if you want the link, for example, or link to a longer video on how to do this, then I can direct message them back. And that starts to build that personal connection a bit more. It's more involved, but if I'm looking to build my audience or convert more, then that might be something that I want to do. So that's new as well. And again, I can choose whether to recommend on Facebook if it'll give me the option to. Sometimes it doesn't allow you with reels because the music or audio you used, it doesn't allow, but sometimes you can allow or not. I mean, at the moment, I'm not sure who's watching reels on Instagram, on Facebook, but sometimes I leave it on, sometimes I don't. If it helps me reach slightly larger audience, yeah, I'm not doing a lot on Facebook to clash with it. So for me, leaving that on perhaps doesn't matter. Any other questions?
Exciting reel.
Right, let me come out of my exciting reel. What I will say to you is, if you do go viral and start getting a lot of followers and a lot of engagement on a reel, you really do need a third-party tool with a managing inbox, because what I can't see is all my comments or comments that I've made, the interaction on other posts in my notifications, because this happens. Because the activity is so frequent, which is great, but there's a downside. I do not have the capacity to look at every account that started following me and going in and clicking on them. But if there's comments, they get lost. So I know, in fact, I think it said, didn't it, when I came in, there were comments. But like if I scroll down, I can't see the comments, and there becomes a point where, because I haven't been on for an hour, anything that's lower than an hour, it was older than an hour ago, I can't get to the notifications about those comments or interactions that I've had on those posts, unless I directly go into those posts on the app, which is great for my interaction. But let's say I've commented on somebody else's post and then they've commented back, I'm not going to see that in my notifications because it's gone. So having a third-party app, in this case with Sprout Social, has been really essential for me to be able to see where there has been activity, because it brings them all into one tool and then I deal with them there. So that's been really crucial. If you are going for growth and you do suddenly get a lot of growth, you need some way of managing that interaction other than just in app, because you can't see it all.